Today is April the 18th. It's the feast of Blessed Marie Anne Blondin, the foundress of the Congregation of St. Anne, one of the many great communities that contributed to education in Canada, in particular in Quebec. She was a pioneer in addressing the need for education for so many children that because of some church policies found themselves illiterate in rural Quebec. She's also a great model of what happens when the institutional politics of communities and of different congregations can rise up and really betray their founders and members of that community. She took St. Anne as her patron for her congregation, and like so many women and men of today, St. Anne provides for her a model of a grandmother who was shut out of the life of leadership of her children in the way of faith, but who nonetheless is able, through prayer and creativity, to be an instrument of God's grace. Let's listen to the homily I preached today. God bless. Praise be Jesus Christ. Christ is risen, alleluia. Carissima familia, today we are encouraged. Barnabas, son of encouragement, shows us the way of surrendering everything to the Lord and finding therein what Nicodemus was having a hard time believing: new life and new power. That was the way of the life of one of our great Canadian saints, Blessed Marie Anne Blondin, a vitally important person in the history, first of all, of education in Canada. She was born into a small Quebec family. Wasn't a small family, but a small Quebec town. There weren't such things as small Quebec families back then. Nowadays, malheureusement, y en a beaucoup, trop. But she grew up basically with grade 2 education. That's all that she could get. Because the church had a very strong rule. And the rule was this: that in classrooms, only men could teach boys and only women could teach girls. There was no crossing of those boundaries. And as a result, in most parishes, the priest didn't have the resources to have two sets. So sometimes it was the boys that were illiterate and sometimes it was the girls that were illiterate in the town. Well, she, though, in her life, was able to get associated with the Congregation de Notre-Dame, founded by Blessed Marguerite Bourgeois, and she was invited into this group of very well-educated women, and attracted by that, she got herself educated, she got herself illiterate, so much so that she was able to join the congregation and become very quickly, at a young age, a principal. And she was still filled with distress at the number of illiterate children. So she went to the bishop and asked him to break canon law, namely, to allow her to set up a community that would teach both boys and girls. And the bishop, impressed by this, and with a little bit of encouragement from the government, who liked this development, followed her lead, and she established, first of all, a school that became known as the Académie Blondin, because she trained other teachers who then joined her community, the Congregation of St. Anne. And she was the foundress of this great community. Now the real story about Mother Blondin begins. What happens? The bishop appointed a priest to help. I don't know. I'm not going to judge that he was a jerk, but he certainly did a lot of jerky things. He lived and thought, I think, in a worldly way. He wanted power. She had the power. He had to get rid of her. And he found other women to collude with, other women religious, in getting rid of the foundress. Not only did he get rid of her, he excoriated her. He went after her character. He just blacklisted her. In fact, he saw to it that her name was removed from the community that she had founded. She was left in utter obscurity, pushed off to the side. What did she do? Scream and fight and sue? Well, today she would have, perhaps. But this is the work of the Lord. And the hardest thing for a parent, and that's why I think Blondin is a great image and patron for us grandparents, who have to watch jerks come into our life and get in the way of the gospel being proclaimed in the lives of our children and our grandchildren, and us and our faith being pushed over to the side, generally. So many of us, even in our schools, the institutions are set up that they're worldly in their thinking, and they push over to the sides anyone who has that sort of intimacy with the Lord, anyone who reminds them of the deep foundations that aren't in their own ego. Well, what did she do? She accepted. She obeyed. And for the rest of her long life, she ended up working in the laundry of the mother house. Never invited to any leadership position again. And what did she do in the laundry? She prayed. And because every single postulant and novice had to pass through the torturous work of cleaning all the underclothes, she formed her community in the laundromat. When she died, she asked pardon of Father Maréchal, the priest who had done all of this to her. But the community had been twisted by his teachings for a long time, and a whole generation passed before they were able to be awakened by when Father Maréchal died, a new priest was given role as chaplain, and he explored her life, and they realized what a gift they had, who their foundress was, and that though they were great founders of schools all over the place, and the first one even bore her name, when did she do the work of forming generations of young people in the faith? When she was working in the laundry, ignored by everyone except the Lord. Except the Lord. And that's the message to us. The Lord knows where we are. He knows our obscurity. He knows our struggles. And he is working through us the power of the resurrection. That is the word that comes from we who look to Marie and Blondin, and we who see in her Barnabas, the child of encouragement.